Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Kidney Coach YouTube channel. I am naturopath Fiona Chin, co-creator of Kaigenesis and co-author of The Kidney Disease Solution. And I am joined today by Emily Cahill. Emily is a fully qualified nurse as well as a fully qualified naturopath. She works in a big, large cardiovascular / neurological ward here in Melbourne, Australia. She also works with me at the Wellness Guru in my clinic. She has a special interest in all things oncology and all things kidney disease, and is just whetting her appetite for all things autoimmune. As I said, Emily likes to pick the 3 hardest things, I think, to work on with patients. Doesn't shy away from the hard stuff, does Emily? She also writes half our blogs. She's the one answering most of your Facebook comments, and she's the one writing most of the Facebook posts. In fact, she writes 99% of them, unless I have a fun idea that I want to post on there. So Emily, thanks for joining us today. We're going to talk about something that no one talks about. And we were just saying before we started recording that I think in my entire 20 years of clinical practice, I can't believe I'm saying that, I've had one patient where this was absolutely what was going on. But we're going to talk about TMAO. And I'll let Emily dive in and talk about all things TMAO, what it is, what it looks like, and how would you know if that was a problem that you had. So why don't you first tell us what it actually is, Emily, because most people are never going to heard of this thing.
So TMAO stands for Trimethylamine-N-oxide. What it is, it's a metabolite that's produced by our gut bacteria from certain foods. So it's from foods that contain choline and carnitine largely. And so those are largely, animal meats, dairy, and eggs. So it's animal products really. And when we eat these foods, our gut bacteria breaks them down and works on them, and it releases something called TMA, so trimethylamine. TMA then gets transported to the liver. And in the liver, it becomes oxidized into TMAO, and it's a certain enzyme in the liver, FMO3, which does that conversion from TMA to TMAO. And then TMAO is excreted in urine from the body. But the problem is that when we have elevated levels of TMAO, it's been linked to a number of different diseases. So particularly cardiovascular disease, that's probably one of the primary links that people are aware of. So blood clots, hardening of the arteries, heart attacks, stroke, heart failure. It's been linked to diabetes. It's been linked to bowel cancer. It's been linked to kidney disease, which is obviously why we're talking about it. Liver problems, so non-alcoholic fatty liver disease or liver damage, neurodegenerative diseases, and inflammation, so just generalized inflammation in the body as well.
Yeah. And so it really is something, if you've got someone that's just eating, lots of meat, or not even that, I guess that's a bit unfair, but because there has to be some down regulation of other pathways for really this to kick up. But you really be finding people are eating a high protein sort of diet, right?
Yes, yeah, exactly. So high protein diet, and because that, I guess, affects it in 2 ways. One is that it's giving the substrate that we need to create the TMA to then be converted into TMAO, but also because what we eat affects the bacteria in our gut and the levels of bacteria in our gut, that there are certain bacteria that are able to create this TMA. So it also depends on the balance of bacteria in your gut, but those bacteria are upregulated in people who eat a lot of protein. So it kind of, I guess, goes hand in hand.
And there are other factors that are linked to it, because I know from memory, like if people have had gastric bypass surgery, I think they have an increased risk of TMAO, right?
Yeah, exactly. So other things like, gastric bypass surgery, having a high fat diet as well. So not just thinking about the protein, but high fat diet too. Sleep deprivation, they've found people have high levels of TMAO levels, type TMAO, and certain pollutants as well, which is likely to do with particularly the action on the liver and increased conversion of TMA into TMAO by that enzyme that does that converting.
Do you know what it is with the sleep deprivation? Is it just the body's not clearing toxins properly? Is that
I'm not sure. Yeah. just that, yeah, they found higher levels, which was interesting.
Okay. So what else do you have to tell me? What's the link between TMAO and kidney disease?
Yeah, so there's a few different links, I guess. One is that TMAO increases the risk of cardiovascular disease, high blood pressure, and diabetes. So our, sort of two primary causes of kidney disease. But then as well, it's been shown to increase the progression, so the loss of kidney function, because it can also increase scarring in the kidneys. So people who had high levels of TMAO had a faster decline in EGFR and a high level of scarring, in particular, obviously in animal studies where they're actually able to cut up the kidney and have a look. More scarring. And then the other link as well seems to be in why people with kidney disease can often have higher levels of TMAO is because initially they thought it was more to do with the excretion of TMAO because we excrete it in urine. They thought, well, if kidneys aren't working as well, therefore, there's reduced excretion of metabolites, that's probably why people have high levels. But what they actually think it's more to do with a greater production of TMA from the gut. And that's because people with kidney disease are more likely to have dysbiosis or an imbalance of bacteria in the gut. And then as well, that enzyme in the liver that converts TMA into TMAO also seems to work faster in people with kidney disease as well. So we're getting higher creation of TMAO through the liver as well.
Okay, that makes sense. And so how would you know, because no one's ever heard of this, it's not a question we get asked a lot of, but it's just something to be aware of. How would you know that you had high TMAO levels? What would be the symptoms?
So in terms of symptoms, I don't think there'd be anything specific. It would more be, something to think about in people who have cardiovascular problems, kidney disease, inflammation, who have a restricted diet potentially, who potentially have some digestive issues, which may be giving us hints towards a bit of dysbiosis. It can be tested on a blood test.
I was about to ask. Yep, okay.
Yeah, I've seen it tested once. So it's definitely not something that's done commonly. I think it will become something that starts to become more common. But at the moment, obviously initially in research, but yeah, it can be tested on a blood test. It is something that you obviously, I don't know if a lot of doctors would be happy or willing to test it because it's not, super well known at the moment. But the other thing, as the other way, is that some stool tests will give us an idea of, depending on the bacteria in the gut, are you more likely to have elevated levels of TMAO looking at your gut bacteria. So that could be another way to potentially look at it if you can't get it tested on a blood test.
And what specific bacteria would you be looking at for elevated TMAO?
So generally it's a higher amount of Firmicutes bacteria. I think it's been also linked to things like Clostridia, E. coli, and a lot of those protein degrading type bacteria as well. Because the interesting thing that they found in people who were vegetarian or vegan is that even when they gave them animal meat and foods high in carnitine or choline, they still had negligible TMAO levels because of the bacteria in their gut. So even when they were eating those foods that typically would increase TMAO, for them it didn't because of their gut. So I guess that gives us a big clue that working on the gut is a big part of it.
Yeah, and it goes to that why we put people on vegetarian diets and why maybe going vegetarian, because we know the gut microbiome changes within, I think it's 2 weeks of just a dietary change. You start to you see that have an influence and change what the microbiome looks like. So, that's maybe one of the reasons that people may not know that they had elevated TMAO, but once we change their diets, once they're following the kidney disease solution program and following that diet, people start to feel better. And maybe part of it is because they're getting a reduction in that, which is fascinating. Are there other things? So what if if someone's worried about it, and they do get a blood test, or they've got a history of like cardiovascular disease and eating a lot of meat and things like that, what things would people do to try and get their levels of TMAO down?
Yeah, so the first thing would be to avoid particularly red meat and dairy, because so TMAO can get produced from carnitine or choline, but the more recent research is showing that it's really largely carnitine as opposed to choline that really drives up TMAO, so red meat and dairy. Also because that then changes the bacteria in the gut, which means that you have more bacteria that's associated with higher TMAO levels. So increasing more plant-based foods, fibrous foods, because as I said, vegetarians and vegans don't produce a lot of TMAO regardless of what they're eating. Avoiding supplements that contain choline or carnitine unless someone's recommended it to you for a specific reason. They've seen that garlic, so increasing garlic helps to prevent the formation of TMAO. So the allicin in garlic, and also cruciferous vegetables. And they're particularly important because they can reduce the activity of the FMO3, that enzyme in the liver that converts the TMA into the TMAO. So they're all sort of dietary things that you can do. And then they've done some studies looking at any supplements that may be able to reduce TMAO levels. And there was a study that showed that taking vitamin D, vitamin B6, folate, and B12, when people took those together, there was a 67% reduction of their TMAO levels. Resveratrol as well. So that's because it inhibits the production of TMA from our gut bugs. And then looking at, probiotics, prebiotics, anything that's going to alter the composition of our gut to a more healthy garden. There's been, when they have done some studies with probiotics, and there's only really been a couple that seem to have been shown to lower TMAO levels. So it doesn't seem to be probiotics in general, but I guess anything that you're doing to change the gut terrain is going to be beneficial.
You're right. I was saying interesting because they are we spoke a couple of weeks ago about methylation. So the B12, folate, B6, vitamin D, they all support methylation cycles. So yeah. Doesn't surprise me if that would be part of that. So
yes.
Yeah, right. Okay. What else do you want to say about TMAO? Because it's a rare thing that people are probably scratching their heads about, but most people, if they did have it, wouldn't know. And hopefully just changing the diet makes a big difference there. Is there anything else you want to add about that?
No, I don't think so. I think, changing your diet it's the best thing you can do, because if you're not eating those foods that are high, particularly in carnitine, then even whatever's happening in your gut microbiome, you're not going to make the TMA. So if you don't make the TMA, we can't go on to make the TMAO. So I think, as a sort of beginning step for everyone, that is a really beneficial thing to do. Perfect.
All right. Change your diet, change your life, huh? And it goes again of why taking red meat out and dairy is, the big key things that we do when we're working with people with kidney disease for a really good reason. And that's part of it. Awesome. Thanks, Emily, again, for your wealth of information about something that most people have probably never heard of, which is cool. It's always good when we're trying to find topics of what to write about. We can come up with some of these weird and wonderful things. So if you've liked this video, make sure you hit a like. And if you hit subscribe, it means that you'll get notified anytime we create more content. If there are any things that any specific topics that you want us to create videos on, make sure you comment in the comments below. I do check those every day and we'll try and get back to you. And then if you want to know more about what we do, head over to www.kidneycoach.com, and there you'll find a link to our supplements that we sell that were developed specifically to cover stage 1 of the kidney disease solution. And if you want to know more about that, that's all on there as well. If you have questions and you're following the program, you can hit us up at support@kidneycoach.com, and one of our qualified naturopaths, Emily being one of them and Rach being the other, will get back to you. And and Emily, again, thank you for sharing your wonderful wealth of knowledge with the all crazy things TMAO. And thanks everyone for being part of our community, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Bye.